No one who hasn't tried for years to get pregnant understands that specific grief. It's not like mourning a person who once existed. It's mourning a future, a dream, a version of yourself that feels further away with every passing month. 3 years, each cycle was a carefully orchestrated dance of hope and devastation. I remember the first time we decided to really try. Ben and I had been married for 2 years, and everything felt perfect. We were young, healthy, in love. We picked out paint colours for a nursery that didn't exist yet. We laughed about baby names over wine on the balcony. Emma, he'd say, or maybe Sophia. I wanted something classic, timeless. We were so naive then, so full of unearned confidence that our bodies would simply cooperate. The first month when my period came, we were disappointed, but not worried. It takes time, Ben said, kissing my forehead. We'll try again. And we did. Month after month, I'd stare at those hormone pills lined up on the bathroom counter, like little soldiers preparing for a battle we kept losing. Each negative test felt like a small death. Each time the promise was broken, another piece of me crumbled and fell away. By year 2, the doctors got involved. Tests, so many tests. Blood work that left my arms bruised and tender. Ultrasounds, where I'd stare at the ceiling while a technician moved a wand across my abdomen in silence. Everything looks normal, they'd say, which somehow felt worse than a diagnosis. At least a diagnosis would give us something to fight, something concrete to blame. Instead, we had unexplained infertility, which is just a medical way of saying, we don't know why your body won't do what it's supposed to do. Joanne, my mother-in-law, had birthed 4 children with the ease of someone shelling peas. She'd tell the stories constantly, at every family gathering, her voice dripping with pride. Oh, with Margaret, I was in labour for only 3 hours. The doctor said he'd never seen anything like it. Or, I was so fertile back then, I used to joke that Ben's father just had to look at me and I'd get pregnant. She'd laugh, and everyone would laugh with her, and I'd sit there with a smile frozen on my face, dying inside. The jokes started subtly. We'd be at Sunday dinner, and she'd bring out a tin of some herbal tea she'd picked up from God knows where. This is fertility tea, she announced, sliding it across the table to me like a pity offering. It worked for my cousin, you know, the one with the bad uterus. She had 3 kids after drinking this for just 2 months. Her smile was saccharine, her eyes gleaming with something that wasn't quite kindness. Worth a try, right, Rachel? I took the tea. Of course I took it. What else could I do? I thanked her, brought it home, and tried not to cry as I brewed cup after cup of the bitter, earthy liquid that tasted like defeat. It didn't work, obviously, but Joanne would ask about it every time she saw me. Still drinking the tea, sweetheart. You have to be consistent with these things. Then there was the magazine incident. Ben and I stayed at Joanne's house one weekend when our apartment was being fumigated. I woke up early, padded to the guest bathroom, and there, spread open on the counter, was a parenting magazine. Not just open, deliberately positioned. The article headline screamed, Advanced Maternal Age, Treatment Options for Women Over 35. Someone had highlighted sections in yellow. I was 28 years old. I stood there in my pyjamas, staring at that magazine, and felt something inside me harden. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. Joanne wanted me to know that even at 28, she considered me already too old, already failing, already running out of time. I closed the magazine, put it in the trash, and went downstairs with a smile plastered on my face. I never mentioned it. That's what I did back then. I swallowed everything. In the beginning, my husband Ben would defend his mother in that passive, dismissive way that slowly erodes your sanity. That's just how she is, he'd say with a shrug, as if her cruelty was just a personality quirk, like being left-handed or allergic to shellfish. She doesn't mean any harm. She's from a different generation. But I noticed the changes in him too. In year 1, he'd come with me to every appointment. He'd hold my hand in the waiting room, thumb rubbing gentle circles on my wrist. When I got my period and broke down crying, he'd buy my favourite ice cream and we'd watch movies until I fell asleep on his shoulder. We're in this together, he'd whisper. By year 2, he started missing appointments. Work emergency, he'd text. Can you handle this one alone? The hand-holding stopped. The ice cream stopped. When I cried, he'd look uncomfortable, like he didn't know what to do with this broken version of his wife. Our intimate life became clinical, scheduled around ovulation calendars and hormone levels. The spontaneity died. The joy died. We were just 2 people trying to manufacture a baby and failing. Year 3 was when he started saying things like, maybe we should just accept that it's not meant to be, or some couples aren't meant to have children. He'd say these things with his back to me, while washing dishes or scrolling through his phone, never meeting my eyes. He'd brush off my concerns with increasing impatience. I don't want to talk about this right now, Rachel. I'm tired. What Ben didn't realise, or maybe he did realise and just didn't care, was that he'd begun treating our fertility struggle as my personal failure. Not our struggle. Mine. He never said it explicitly, but I could feel it in the way he'd flinch when his sisters announced their pregnancies, then glance at me with something that looked like resentment. I could hear it in the way he'd go quiet. When his mother made her little comments, his silence a tacit agreement that yes, something was wrong with me. Though no doctor ever diagnosed me as infertile, we had unexplained infertility, which is medically very different. The whispers in his family grew and morphed into certainty. At family gatherings, I could feel the weight of their pity and judgment. Ben's sisters would talk about their children in hushed tones when I was nearby, as if the mere mention of kids would shatter me. His aunts would avoid eye contact when the topic of babies came up, their discomfort palpable. And then there was Joanne, who never bothered with subtlety. She'd drop her poison pills with surgical precision, always with that smile. At a 4th of July barbecue, she was holding her newest grandchild, nuzzling the baby's head, and she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Some women are just made for this. It's in their nature, you know. They were born to be mothers." Then she'd look up, catch my eye, and add with a shrug, "Others, not so much. We can't all be good at everything." That slow, smiling knife to the heart. That was Joanne's specialty. I blamed myself for everything. Maybe it was my diet. I cut out caffeine, alcohol, processed foods. Maybe it was stress. I tried meditation apps, went to yoga classes where everyone else seemed to be glowing pregnant women. Maybe it was my weight, my exercise routine, my sleep schedule. I tried acupuncture, lying on a table while tiny needles pricked my skin, hoping ancient medicine could fix whatever modern medicine couldn't identify. I unfollowed every pregnant influencer on social media. I stopped going to baby showers, making up excuses that grew increasingly transparent. "I'm so sorry, I have a work thing. I'm not feeling well. I have a family obligation." The truth was, I couldn't bear to sit in a room full of onesies and booties, playing games about baby food flavours, smiling while inside I was screaming. The questions from well-meaning friends and relatives were constant. "So, when are you two going to have kids?" They'd ask it with bright, expectant faces, like it was the most natural question in the world. At first, I'd make vague comments about soon, or we're working on it. But as the years passed, I ran out of polite deflections. I started lying outright. "Oh, we're focusing on our careers right now. We want to travel first." Anything to avoid the truth, that my body was refusing to do the one thing society told me it was designed for. I became so quiet, so small, so afraid of taking up space or voicing my pain. I was still the polite daughter-in-law who brought pie to family, dinners, who helped wash dishes while the other women chatted, who listened to Joanne's repetitive stories without ever interrupting. I was terrified of being seen as ungrateful, bitter, or broken. So I stayed silent, swallowed my feelings, and smiled until my face hurt. I lost touch with my own emotions. I couldn't tell you what I was feeling on any given day because I'd buried it all so deep. Sad, angry, hopeful, defeated. It all blurred together into a dull, constant ache that I learned to ignore the way you ignore chronic back pain. It was just always there, part of my existence. Until that night. The night that changed. Everything. It was my father-in-law's 65th birthday. Joanne had been planning it for weeks, sending group texts about the menu, the decorations, what everyone should wear. "Let's make it special," she'd written. "Family photos, the good china, the works." I volunteered to help, of course. That's what I did. I arrived early that Saturday evening, carrying a homemade apple pie and a bottle of expensive wine. Joanne answered the door in a cream silk blouse and pearls, looking every bit the matriarch. "Oh, Rachel," she said, eyeing the pie. "How rustic. I hope it doesn't clash with the dessert I ordered from that French patisserie downtown. I can. Keep it for another time," I offered, already feeling that familiar shrinking sensation. No, bring it in. I'm sure someone will eat it." She turned away, heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "You can help set the table. The silverware is already out." I spent the next hour arranging place settings, folding cloth napkins, lighting candles. Joanne supervised, occasionally correcting the placement of a fork or the angle of a wine glass. Ben arrived with his sisters and their families, a chaos of children and laughter, and the easy warmth of people who belonged. I watched from the dining room, arranging flowers, feeling like hired help. Dinner started smoothly enough. The roast beef was perfect, pink in the middle, the rosemary potatoes crispy and golden. Wine flowed freely. Joanne was in her element, holding court at the head of the table, regaling everyone with stories they'd all heard 1,000 times. She was in the middle of describing her oldest daughter Margaret's birth. The doctor said, "My pelvis was built for childbirth, absolutely textbook," when I leaned toward Ben. The IVF clinic had sent an email that morning. After months on the waiting list, they had openings in January. It felt like a small sliver of hope, and I wanted to share it with my husband, quietly, just between us. I kept my voice low, barely above a whisper. "They opened new appointments for January at the IVF clinic." Ben nodded, squeezed my hand under the table, and I felt a flutter of connection, a reminder of the team we used to be. But Joanne's hearing was sharp, honed by years of eavesdropping and control. Her story stopped mid-sentence. The table fell quiet, everyone sensing a shift in the atmosphere the way animals sense an approaching storm. She turned to me, her face a mask of pleasant confusion that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, did you—" "Say something, Rachel." I was speaking. My throat went dry. I was telling Ben about— "Oh, shut up, Barren." The words were delivered with cold precision, each syllable crisp and deliberate. Not shouted. Joanne was too refined for shouting, but the venom was unmistakable. She might as well have slapped me across the face. Silence. The kind of silence that transforms a room into a tomb. The candles kept flickering. Steam still rose from the serving dishes. But all the life had been sucked out of the air. I felt every pair of eyes shift to me. Ben's sisters, their husbands, even the older children who were suddenly very interested in their plates. Then, one by one, those eyes darted away, unwilling to witness my humiliation, unwilling to defend me. My husband, Ben, the man who had promised to love and protect me, stared down at his plate as if the pattern on the china was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. His jaw tightened slightly, the only indication he'd even heard what his mother said. But he didn't speak, didn't defend me, didn't even look at me. No one said a word. Not Ben's father, who suddenly became very interested in cutting his meat. Not his sisters, who found their wine glasses desperately in need of attention. Not his brother-in-law, who coughed and shifted in his seat. The silence was their verdict. I was on my own. I had always been on my own. The pain wasn't in the word itself, though barren felt like a brand being pressed into my skin. The pain came from the abandonment, the collective cowardice of people who called themselves family. It came from the harsh, undeniable realization that in this room full of people, I was utterly alone. My throat tightened. The food on my plate, the roast I'd looked forward to, the potatoes I'd helped prepare, turned to ash in my mouth. My hands trembled slightly, and I placed my fork down carefully, afraid I might drop it and shatter the terrible silence. Part of me wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to throw my wine in Joanne's smug face and flip the table like something out of a movie. But I did none of those things. Instead, I felt something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. A decision made in an instant that would change the trajectory of everything that came after. I didn't cry. That was my first act of revenge. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. I reached for my purse with steady hands, my movements deliberate and calm. I looked like a woman who was simply ready to leave, not a woman whose heart was shattering into 1,000 pieces. "Good night," I said softly, to no one in particular. I walked to the door, put on my coat, found my keys, and still no one spoke. Not a single wait. Not a single Rachel, don't go. Not a single mum, that was too far. Nothing. The silence followed me all the way to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, key in the ignition, and realised I was shaking. Not from sadness, from rage. Pure, white-hot. Rage at Joanne for her cruelty. At Ben for his cowardice. At myself for enduring this for so long, for making myself small, for believing I deserved this treatment. Stopped at a red light on the empty street, I leaned my head against the steering. Wheel and felt one hot tear roll down my cheek. Just one. But it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of transformation. The old Rachel, the quiet, accommodating, desperate to please Rachel, died in that moment. When the light turned green, I lifted my head. In the rearview mirror, my face looked pale, my eyes red-rimmed. I reached into my purse, pulled out my red lipstick, the bold one I never wore because Joanne once said it made me look trying too hard, and carefully applied it, a slash of defiant colour, a war paint of sorts. I looked at my reflection and said out loud, "You're still here. And they have no idea what's coming." My revenge had begun. And Joanne, sitting at that dinner table, probably already moving on with her evening, probably already dismissing me as handled and dealt with, had no idea that she had just signed her own downfall. To truly understand what happened next, you need to understand the depth of what those 3 years took from me. Infertility isn't just a medical condition. It's a slow erasure of your identity, your hope, your sense of control over your own life. Every month followed the same brutal pattern. Day 1, my period would arrive, and with it, a wave of grief that I'd learned to hide. I'd go to work with a smile, make small talk by the coffee machine, sit through meetings while my body cramped and my heart broke. At home, I'd allow myself exactly 10 minutes to cry in the shower, then I'd pull myself together and start the cycle again. Days 5 through 14 were the hopeful days. This month would be different. I'd track everything obsessively: basal body temperature, ovulation strips, cervical mucus. I had apps on my phone with little flowers and eggs, cheerful interfaces designed to make fertility tracking feel fun and empowering. It felt more like surveillance of a body that kept betraying me. Ben and I would have scheduled sex, timed to the exact optimal window. There was no spontaneity, no romance, just efficiency and desperation. Afterward, I'd lie with my hips elevated, staring at the ceiling, willing my body to cooperate. Ben would usually get up, take a shower, go back to whatever he was doing. The intimacy had long since died. Days 15 through 28 were the symptom tracking days. Was that a twinge in my abdomen, implantation cramping, or just gas? Was I more tired than usual? Early pregnancy, or just life? I'd Google endlessly, falling into rabbit holes of fertility forums where women analysed every microscopic change in their bodies with the intensity of scientific researchers. I'd buy pregnancy tests in bulk from Amazon, hiding them in the back of the bathroom cabinet. I'd promised myself I'd wait until my period was late, but I never could. I'd start testing at 10 days post-ovulation, knowing it was too early, unable to help myself. Negative, negative, negative. Each stark white test, another small death. When? My period finally came, usually right on schedule. The cycle would begin again. 3 years, 36 cycles. 36 times I rode that roller coaster of hope and devastation. The doctor's appointments became more invasive as time went on. They checked my hormone levels, all normal. My ovarian reserve, perfectly fine. Did an HSG test where they shot. Dye through my fallopian tubes while I lay on a cold table, cramping and humiliated. Tubes were clear. Ben got his sperm tested. Normal count and motility, the doctor said, though his count was on the lower end of normal. They never seemed to focus on that detail. We tried 3 rounds of IUI, intrauterine insemination. I'd go to the clinic early in the morning, where they'd perform the procedure in a sterile room that smelled like antiseptic. Ben would have produced his sample in a little room down the say, hall with magazines and a lock on the door. The whole thing felt clinical and sad. None of the 3 rounds worked. IVF was the next step, but it was expensive. 15,000, 15,000, 20,000 per round, most of it not covered by insurance. We'd have to save for it. Ben seemed hesitant. Maybe we should take a break from all this, he'd say. It's consuming our whole lives. He was right. It was consuming. But he could afford to take a break. His body wasn't the one being scrutinised. His worth wasn't being measured by his ability to reproduce. The emotional toll was compounded by Joanne's constant commentary. She didn't just make the occasional insensitive remark. It was a steady drip of toxicity, carefully designed to remind me of my failure. At Easter dinner, she gave all her other daughters-in-law beautiful jewellery, a pearl necklace for Margaret, diamond earrings for Sarah. She gave me a book titled The Purpose-Driven Life Finding Meaning Beyond Motherhood. I opened it at the table while everyone watched. The room went awkwardly silent. Joanne smiled sweetly. I just thought it might be helpful for you, dear. You know, to find other ways to feel fulfilled. At Christmas, she gave the other women expensive perfume and designer scarves. I got a set of dish towels and a bar of soap with a clearance sticker still on the bottom, $2.99 from TJ Maxx. When I peeled the sticker off later at home, I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. She'd make comments about real mothers versus pet. Mothers when Ben's sister would talk about her dogs. It's not the same though, is it? Nothing compares to actually carrying a child, nursing them, raising them. That's what real women do. She'd glance at me as she said it, her message crystal clear. At a family barbecue, one of Ben's cousins announced she was pregnant, a surprise, unplanned pregnancy with her boyfriend of 6 months. Joanne cried with joy, hugged her, called it a miracle and a blessing. She didn't notice or care that I had to excuse myself and spend 15 minutes in the bathroom trying not to vomit from the unfairness of it all. The worst part was how Ben enabled all of it. When I'd bring it up later, "Your mum really hurt me today," he'd minimise it. "She was just excited about the baby. You're being too sensitive." That's not what she meant. He'd make me feel crazy for being hurt, like I was the problem, not his mother's cruelty. Over time, I internalised the message. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I was broken. Maybe I didn't deserve to be a mother. Maybe God or the universe or whatever cosmic force controlled these things had looked at me and decided I wasn't worthy. I stopped talking about it with friends. I couldn't bear their pity or their platitudes. It'll happen when it's meant to. Happen? Just relax and it'll happen. Have you tried acupuncture? Yes, I'd tried everything. Their attempts at comfort only highlighted how little they understood. I became isolated, withdrawing from relationships, from activities I used to love, from the person I used to be. I was a shell, going through the motions, waiting for my body to do the one thing everyone expected of it, and that it stubbornly refused to do. By the time that dinner happened, the shut-up Barren dinner, I had been worn down to almost nothing. I was a raw nerve, a wound that never healed, a woman who had forgotten what it felt like to be whole. That's why Joanne's words were so devastating, not because they were new, but because they were the culmination of 3 years of death by 1,000 cuts. And she delivered them in front of everyone, making my private pain public, my secret shame a family spectacle. But that's also why what happened next was so powerful. because when you push someone who has nothing left to lose, you don't get submission, you get revolution. I didn't sleep that night after the dinner. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Ben snored softly beside me, apparently unbothered by the fact that his mother had just publicly humiliated his wife and he'd said nothing. Absolutely nothing. Around 3 a.m, I got up, went to my home office and opened my laptop. The glow of the screen in the dark room felt appropriate, like I was about to do something covert, something that required darkness. I'd always been good with money. That was part of what made me successful as an engineer: attention to detail, systems thinking, the ability to see how all the pieces connected. And as I sat there in my pajamas, I began to see the whole system very clearly. Joanne lived like a woman of independent means, but the truth was, she had no money of her own. Her husband, Ben's father, was retired on a modest pension, comfortable, but not extravagant. Joanne's lifestyle, the one she flaunted, the one she used as proof of. Her superiority was funded almost entirely by her children. Specifically, it had been funded by Ben. And for the past 6 months since Ben lost his job, it had been funded by me. Let me break down exactly how much I'd been paying for Joanne's independence, the credit card in Ben's name that she used. For emergencies, she put about $100-200 a month on it. Hair salon, mani-pedis, lunches with friends, department store purchases. I'd been paying the minimum payments, watching the balance grow, saying nothing because Ben asked me not to make waves. The gym membership at that fancy club with the sauna, pool and spa services, $180 a month. I'd been covering it, her monthly allowance that Ben sent her, $500. She sacrificed so much raising us, he'd said when he set it up years ago. It's the least I can do. Even unemployed, he'd wanted to keep sending it. I'd been the one earning it, the car insurance on the luxury SUV that Ben's father had bought her for their anniversary, $200 a month, on our insurance policy because it was cheaper that way. The country club dues, $350 a month, also on a card in Ben's name. Random expenses she'd text Ben about. The cleaning lady raised her rates, can you send $100? I need a new winter coat, the old one is so worn out. The charity gala is coming up, I need an evening gown and shoes. Always small enough amounts that they seemed reasonable in isolation, but together they added up to nearly $3,000 a month. For why? 6 months, while my husband was unemployed and I was working 50-hour weeks, pulling extra shifts, taking on additional projects to keep us afloat. I had been subsidizing the lifestyle of a woman who called me Barren at a family dinner. The rage that had been simmering since I left that dinner turned into something colder and more focused. Calculation replaced emotion. I wasn't going to yell or confront. I was going to dismantle. I started with the credit card. I was an authorized user on the account. Ben had added me when we got married to help manage bills. That gave me the power to make changes. At 3:17 a.m, I called the credit card company's automated line and reported the card as lost or stolen. A new card would be issued to our address with a new number. Joanne's version would simply stop working. Next, the gym membership. I logged into the account, again under Ben's email that I had access to, and cancelled it. The confirmation. Email came through immediately. Your membership will terminate at the end of the current billing cycle. The country club was trickier. There was a contract and early termination meant fees, but I noticed that the account was 3 months behind on payments. I'd been planning to catch it up with my next paycheck, but now I simply let it lapse. They'd revoke her access soon enough. I set up a new bank account in my name only and had my paychecks rerouted there. The joint account where I'd been depositing everything would no longer be fed by my income. Ben would have to figure out his mother's allowance with his own money, which at the moment he didn't have. I didn't cancel everything in one night. That would be too obvious, too easy to identify as sabotage. I spread it out over the course of a week, making each cut look like a natural consequence of our financial situation, which in a way it was. We genuinely couldn't afford to maintain Joanne's lifestyle. I was just no longer willing to sacrifice mine to try. The following Wednesday was when it all started to unravel for her, and I got to watch it happen in real time. Joanne had a standing appointment at an upscale salon every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Hair, nails, the works. She'd been going to the same place for 15 years, always paying with that credit card. She treated the stylists like servants. I'd heard the stories from Ben's sisters about how she'd snap her fingers for tea, complain about the water temperature, leave minimal tips. At 2:47 p.m, my phone rang. Ben's cell. I was at my desk at work, in the middle of reviewing engineering specs, and I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Rachel. His voice was tight, stressed. Did you do something to my credit card? Which one? I asked calmly, clicking. I threw a CAD model on my screen, the one my mum uses. She just called me from the salon. It was declined. She's humiliated. She's saying the stylist treated her like a criminal, made her try it multiple times in front of everyone.